I never planned to fall in love with her. Actually, I wasn't planning anything at all. When I met Emily, I was 29, and my life felt like a gray wallpaper, functional, quiet, and lifeless. I worked remotely as a software engineer in Chicago. Same apartment, same view of the brick building across the street, same microwave meals and Spotify playlists I'd been looping for years. My friends were getting married or moving to the suburbs, while I stayed behind, orbiting my own routine like a satellite that had lost signal to Earth. And then came Emily. We met on a random Thursday night in March, through something so painfully modern, a mutual friend's Zoom birthday party. I remember logging in, already slightly buzzed, expecting 2 hours of polite small talk. But then, in the bottom left corner of my screen, I saw her. Dark blonde hair, tied messily in a bun, oversized hoodie, warm brown eyes behind glasses. She laughed at something someone said, and for some reason, the sound pulled me out of autopilot. It wasn't even her looks, it was the way her laughter seemed unfiltered, like it came from the center of her chest. We talked for the first time when everyone else started to log off. I don't even remember what we said, something about the music playlist, then about how neither of us liked Zoom parties, then about how the world felt like it was moving on without us. When the call ended, she messaged me on Instagram. "You looked bored too," she wrote. And that's how it started. We began chatting every day. Morning, night, in between work meetings. She lived in Portland, on the other side of the country. 3 time zones apart. But somehow, she felt closer than anyone in my own city. She was studying environmental design, working part-time at a coffee shop, trying to finish her master's thesis while dealing with a roommate she hated. She'd send me random pictures, her cat asleep in a laundry basket, the rainy street outside her window, the mess of books on her desk. I'd reply with photos of my takeout dinners, my dying office plant, or the sunset from my apartment's rooftop. We joked that we were living parallel lives, both a little lonely, both a little lost. There wasn't any flirting at first. Just connection. Genuine, unforced, a kind of friendship that felt rare. But as weeks went by, I noticed how she started sneaking into my day in quiet ways. Her messages were the first thing I checked in the morning and the last thing I read before bed. One night, after weeks of chatting, she asked, "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for your real life to start?" I told her, "All the time." There was a pause. Then she said, "Me too." Something about that moment felt electric, like 2 people quietly admitting a truth they didn't know how to say out loud. Our first date wasn't in person, it was over a video call. We both ordered pizza and watched the same movie, hitting play at the same time. I remember she laughed at the dumbest jokes, and when the movie ended, we just stayed there, talking until sunrise. We talked about childhood dreams, regrets, family, the kind of love we believed in. She told me about her dad leaving when she was 12, how she still hadn't forgiven him. I told her about my failed engagement, how I'd broken it off because I realized I was trying to love someone who didn't really see me. She didn't judge. She just listened, deeply, like every word mattered. Somewhere in those late-night calls, I started falling for her. Not in the swipe right kind of way. It was slower, quieter. Like realizing a song you've been humming for weeks actually means something to you. 3 months later, we decided to meet in person. I booked a flight to Portland. I remember sitting on the plane, nervous as hell. I'd never done something like that before, flying across the country for someone I technically hadn't met. When I arrived at the airport, she was standing by the arrivals gate, holding a cardboard sign that said, "About damn time." I laughed so hard I almost dropped my bag. She looked smaller in person, but her energy filled the room. We hugged, and it felt like every digital conversation had suddenly become real. That weekend, we did everything and nothing. We got coffee at her favorite spot, walked along the Willamette River, watched street musicians, and talked for hours on park benches. It felt like the city was breathing with us. That first night, as we sat by the water, she turned to me and said, "You feel familiar." I smiled and said, "You too." We kissed for the first time right there. It wasn't fireworks or cinematic music. It was soft, hesitant, but real. The kind of kiss that says, "I've been waiting for this." The next few months were a blur of flights, calls, and messages. Long distance became our normal. We'd plan weekends together. Sometimes she'd fly to Chicago, Sometimes I'd go to Portland. Every goodbye at the airport hurt, but every reunion felt worth it. We learned to fill the distance with rituals, morning voice notes, shared Spotify playlists, late-night FaceTimes. I'd fall asleep to the sound of her breathing through my phone. She once said, "It's weird, right? How we can be so far apart, but it still feels like home when we talk." And I knew exactly what she meant. By the end of the year, I started thinking about moving. Portland had started to feel like more than just her city. It felt like possibility. But life, as it tends to do, had other plans. Her mom got sick. Nothing too serious at first, but it pulled Emily back into her hometown, a small place in northern Oregon. She started working extra shifts to help out, and our calls became shorter. I didn't blame her, I just missed her. Still, I told myself love was supposed to adapt. We were supposed to be strong enough. But cracks began to show, slow, invisible, like hairlines on glass. I'll stop here for now. Because what happened next, how everything started to change, deserves its own part. If you've ever loved someone who slowly drifted out of your reach, you'll understand. When people talk about falling out of love, they usually describe it as an explosion, a fight, a betrayal, a single moment that burns everything down. But in my case, it wasn't fire. It was fog. A slow, quiet fading. After Emily moved back to her hometown, our rhythm changed. At first, it was subtle. She'd reply a little later, her voice messages got shorter, her laughter on calls started sounding tired. She wasn't pulling away on purpose. Life was just heavy. Her mom's condition got worse, her work hours stretched longer, and she told me she felt like she was constantly running on empty. I wanted to help, but what do you do when the person you love is fighting a battle you can't join? I'd send her care packages, little things, her favorite chocolate, books we talked about, a scarf I thought she'd like. Sometimes she'd text me when they arrived, sometimes days later. I tried to be understanding. I told myself that love wasn't about constant connection, it was about patience. But the silence started to hurt. I remember one night, it was 1:47 a.m. in Chicago. I couldn't sleep, so I scrolled through our old messages. Thousands of them. Photos, inside jokes, late-night confessions. And I realized something that scared me. Our conversations used to feel like dancing. Now they felt like tiptoeing around ghosts. When we finally talked the next day, she sounded distracted. I asked if everything was okay, and she said, "Yeah, just tired." I wanted to tell her how much I missed her, how I felt like we were slipping through the cracks. But instead, I just said, "Okay, I get it." Because that's what you do when you love someone who's already stretched thin. You hold your pain quietly. Weeks passed. Then months. The distance between us wasn't just miles anymore. We still called sometimes, but the calls became practical. "How was your day? How's your mom? Are you sleeping okay?" No more deep talks, no more laughter over nothing. One night, after another half-hearted conversation, I said, "Do you still feel like we're us?" There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "I don't know." Those 3 words hit me harder than I expected. Because deep down, I already knew the answer. I flew to Oregon in March, almost a year after we'd first met. She picked me up at the airport, just like before. Same smile, same eyes. But when I hugged her, something was different. There was hesitation, not coldness, just distance, the kind you can't measure but you feel in your bones. We spent that weekend together, pretending everything was fine. Coffee shops, long drives, the same old jokes that didn't land the same way. Saturday night, we sat in her car by the lake, the one she loved. The moonlight shimmered on the water, and for a moment, it felt like old times. But then she said softly, "I feel like I'm changing, and I don't know where you fit in anymore." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to fight, to tell her we could figure it out, that love could survive this. But another part, the honest one, knew she wasn't asking for reassurance. She was telling me the truth. I asked her, "Do you still love me?" She looked at me, tears in her eyes, and said, "I'll always care about you." That's the kind of sentence that sounds kind until you realize what it really means. The next morning, I packed my bag. She drove me to the airport. Neither of us spoke much. When we reached the terminal, she leaned over, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Thank you for being part of my life." It was such a painfully polite way to end something that once felt infinite. I got out of the car, walked through security, and cried quietly on the plane like a child. The months after that were strange. Grief is weird when the person you lost is still alive. You can't delete their number. You can't burn their memory. They exist, just not with you. I tried to move on. Went back to work, rejoined the gym, started seeing friends again. I even went on a few dates, though they all felt like acting. Every time I'd sit across from someone new, I'd catch myself comparing. Her laugh wasn't like Emily's, her voice didn't calm me the same way. I hated myself for it. I started journaling, something I hadn't done since college. Mostly rambling thoughts about love, loss, and how unfair it felt to meet someone who made me feel alive only to lose them to time and circumstance. One night, about 6 months later, she texted me, "Hey, I was just thinking about you." My heart did that stupid thing where it forgot everything logical and jumped straight to hope. We talked for a bit, small stuff at first. Work, her mom, life. Then she said, "Sometimes I wonder if we gave up too soon." And just like that, every scar I'd tried to heal started bleeding again. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I wrote her a message I never sent. It said, "I still love you, but I don't think love is the problem. Timing is. You met me when you needed comfort, and I met you when I needed connection. Maybe we filled the empty parts of each other for a while, but that doesn't mean we were meant to last forever." I deleted it. Because sometimes closure isn't a conversation. It's silence. By the end of that year, I finally started to feel like myself again, or maybe just a version of myself that accepted the pain as part of the story. Then, out of nowhere, I got a postcard. No return address. Just handwriting I knew instantly. It said, "I hope you're happy. I really do. Thank you for teaching me what love could look like." I sat on my couch for an hour, just holding it. No tears, no anger. Just quiet gratitude. Because even though it hurt, I realized she wasn't a mistake. She was a chapter. And chapters aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to teach you something. I wish I could say that's where the story ends. But love has a funny way of circling back when you least expect it. About a year after that postcard, I was walking home from work, scrolling through my phone, when I saw a familiar name pop up on Instagram. Emily. She'd posted for the first time in months, a picture of a coastline, captioned, "Starting over." Without thinking, I liked it. A few minutes later, she sent me a DM. "Hey, stranger." And suddenly, all the air in my lungs felt different again. I'll pause here. Because what happened next wasn't what I expected. Not in the painful way, not in the fairy tale way either. It was something in between, the kind of ending that doesn't really end. When I saw her message, "Hey, stranger," I just stared at it. For a full minute, I didn't type anything. It had been almost 2 years since we'd last spoken. 2 years of silence, healing, trying to convince myself that she belonged to another time in my life. But the truth, a small part of me had never stopped thinking about her. I typed back, "Hey, been a while." She replied almost instantly, "Yeah, guess it has." We talked for hours that night. It started casual, what we'd been up to, jobs, family, the usual surface-level stuff. But slowly, the conversation deepened, the way it always used to. She told me she'd moved to Seattle. That her mom was doing better now. That she'd started her own design firm with a friend. She sounded lighter, calmer, more grounded. I told her I'd been promoted, that I'd moved to a bigger apartment, that I'd adopted a rescue dog named Max. She laughed and said, "You? A dog person?" I said, "Guess people change." And then she said softly, "Yeah, they do." We didn't talk about us that night. Not directly. But everything between the lines was heavy with what used to be, and what still might be. Over the next few weeks, we kept messaging. Nothing romantic, nothing reckless. Just two people reconnecting, cautiously testing the waters. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the old ache. It was different. It felt like seeing a place you once called home, familiar, but not yours anymore. A month later, she texted me, "I'm visiting Chicago next week. Want to grab coffee?" I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to say no, to protect whatever fragile peace I'd built. But another part, the human part, wanted to see her. So I said yes. We met at a little cafe near the river, one of those places where time seems to move slower. She walked in wearing a light gray coat and a soft smile. Same eyes, same presence, but something about her was different, steadier, like she'd finally found her balance. We hugged. It felt warm. Not electric, not heavy. Just warm. We sat down and talked for hours. About everything: careers, regrets, the pandemic years, the people we used to be. At one point, she looked at me and said, "Do you ever think about what we were?" I nodded. All the time. But not in a sad way anymore. She smiled. "Yeah, me too." That conversation was the first time I truly understood what healing looks like. It's not forgetting. It's remembering without falling apart. After coffee, we walked by the river. The sky was turning gold, and the city looked alive in that quiet, cinematic way. She stopped, looked at me and said, "You were good to me, you know." I don't think I ever said that enough. I said, "You were good for me, even when it hurt." We stood there in silence for a bit. No need for closure, no need for promises. Just gratitude. Then she said, half smiling, "So, friends." I laughed. "Yeah, friends." And it wasn't a lie. It felt right. After that, we kept in touch once in a while. Messages on birthdays, random memes, updates about life. Nothing deep, nothing obsessive. Just gentle reminders that we still existed in each other's orbit, not as lovers, but as people who once mattered deeply. And weirdly enough, that was enough. Over time, I started dating again. Her name was Rachel. She worked in marketing, loved hiking, and had this way of laughing with her whole face. At first, I was terrified. Afraid of repeating the same patterns, afraid of measuring her against a ghost. But she was patient. She didn't ask me to erase my past, she just wanted to be part of my present. And one day, months into our relationship, I realized something. I hadn't compared her to Emily in weeks. That was the moment I knew I'd finally moved on. Sometimes, at night, I'd still think about Emily, not with sadness, just curiosity. Wondering where she was, what she was designing, if she was happy. One evening, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw her story, a photo of the ocean, captioned, "The hardest goodbyes teach you the best hellos." I smiled. Because that's exactly what we were. We were a goodbye that taught me how to say hello again. It's strange how love works. When you're in it, it feels like the whole world. When it ends, it feels like the end of the world. But with time, you realize it was just one part of the story, not the whole book. Emily didn't ruin me. She shaped me. She taught me patience, empathy, and what real vulnerability looks like. She showed me that love isn't always meant to last. Sometimes it's meant to wake you up. Last summer, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. It was from her. My chest tightened when I read her name next to someone else's. But when I looked closer, I felt something I didn't expect: joy. Because she deserved happiness. And for the first time, I wasn't sad that it wasn't with me. I didn't go to the wedding. I sent a small gift instead, a hand-painted photo frame with a note that said, "Wishing you the same peace you once gave me." A week later, she texted back a single heart emoji. And that was it. No drama, no pain. Just peace. Sometimes I wonder if she ever tells her new partner about me, the guy she met through a Zoom party, who flew across the country for her, who loved her quietly through the hardest part of her life. Maybe she does. Maybe she doesn't. But I don't need to know. Because that's the thing about growing up. You stop needing to be remembered in someone's story to feel complete in your own. Now, when I think about her, I think of rain-soaked Portland streets, the sound of her laughter through a laptop speaker, and the cardboard sign she held at the airport that said, "About damn time." I think of a version of me who was scared to open up, and how she helped me learn to love without holding back. I think of how life moves, how people enter and leave at exactly the right time, even if it doesn't feel that way then. And I think about how, somewhere out there, She's probably sitting in her studio, drinking coffee, humming to herself, and I hope she's smiling. Because I am too. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Not every love story is meant to last forever. But that doesn't make it any less beautiful. Some loves are bridges, not destinations. Some people are chapters, not epilogues. And if you're lucky, those chapters will teach you how to love again. Better, deeper, and without fear. I'm 32 now. Life's not perfect, but it's good. I walk my dog every morning, drink coffee that's way too strong, and sometimes catch myself smiling at nothing. Rachel and I are still together. We talk about the future, moving somewhere quieter, maybe getting a cabin near the mountains. And every once in a while, when we sit watching the sunset, she'll lean her head on my shoulder and say, "I'm glad I met you." And I'll whisper back, "Me too." And in those moments, I realize something simple but profound. Every love, no matter how it ends, leads you somewhere worth going.